David Bates. I'm a state representative from Rockingham District 4. I represent Windham and Salem, and I'm the prime sponsor for House Bill 437, the legislation that is intended to restore the true meaning of marriage in our state statutes. I called this press conference today for two reasons. Number one, I've had a steady flow of inquiries seeking information about when the House would vote on this legislation. And the Judiciary Committee, their report of ought to pass as amended on House Bill 437 will appear in the calendar this week. It'll be published on Thursday and will be scheduled for action in the House next week. The other purpose for calling this press conference is to present the floor amendment that I intend to offer when the bill comes to the floor next week. And this introduces some important changes to the bill. I suspect that many of you don't remember the details of what occurred in 2009 when the previous legislature passed the law that gave us the current illegitimate definition of marriage in our New Hampshire law. At the time, the Democrats had a healthy majority in both the House and the Senate, and therefore they controlled all of the committees. But they could not get an ought to pass recommendation from the Judiciary Committee in either the House or the Senate. I don't know if you remember that. But the House Judiciary Committee reported the bill out with no recommendation because they couldn't achieve a majority vote. In the Senate Judiciary Committee recommended inexpedient to legislate. There never was much enthusiasm in New Hampshire for this oxymoron of same-sex marriage. That is why the Democrats had to push that bill through the legislature in a similar fashion to the way Obamacare was forced through Congress. In 2009, when that unpopular bill to alter the meaning of marriage here in New Hampshire, when it was first voted on in the House, the vote failed. The bill's proponents persisted. They compelled people to change their votes, and they finally prevailed by very, very slim margins. If today we could change the law back again by the same razor-thin margins which it was passed originally in 2009, it would be a fairly simple task for us. However, as all of you know, the law that is now in effect, and Governor Lynch has pledged to veto this legislation when the House and Senate pass it. So we now have a much higher burden of having to obtain a supermajority of 67% in order to have this bill become law, notwithstanding the governor's veto. Achieving that level of support on any issue is difficult. But I've been working with the House and Senate members to reach a consensus that will be necessary to be successful. Since I introduced this legislation over a year ago, I've been continually trying to refine the bill and find language that would be acceptable to the greatest number of legislators possible. Today I want to share with you what we have arrived at. And we'll have copies of the actual amendment to distribute after we're through here. The first section of the bill will reestablish civil unions, but they now will have the same limitations that the previous New Hampshire civil union law had. This will eliminate the baseless but effective hysterical claims that others have been making that this bill would permit incest or encourage incest here in New Hampshire. That will no longer be an issue. The language regarding protection for religious liberties was also eliminated. So our opponents can no longer make the ridiculous claims that this law would eradicate the state's anti-discrimination laws. The second section of the bill, pertaining specifically to marriage, returns to the true meaning of natural marriage, and it was pared down to its most essential elements. There's now only two brief paragraphs in this legislation regarding RSA 457, our statute on marriage. It's brief enough, I'll read it to you right now. 457.1 says, the state has a compelling interest in recognizing and maintaining the distinctiveness of the marital union between opposite-sex couples due to its unique procreative potential. Every child has a natural right to love, support, and nurturing by his or her natural mother and father, whenever possible. Marriage is the primary social institution that promotes this ideal and encourages its achievement. Only the union of one man and one woman shall be recognized as marriage in New Hampshire, except, however, any marriage recognized as valid in the state prior to the effective date of this section shall continue to be recognized as valid on or after the effective date of this section. And there's one other brief section of the law, RSA 457:4, that we're just striking out the couple of references to marriages of the same gender. And that's all the changes that this bill will make to the marriage law. The last section of the bill, and perhaps the most significant change, is in a new section that has been added in order to submit a ballot question to the voters in November. The question will simply ask, shall New Hampshire law allow civil unions for same-sex couples and define marriage as a union of one man and one woman? That is precisely what this bill will do. So in November, we can find out unequivocally, once and for all, what the citizens of New Hampshire believe and what they want regarding marriage and civil unions in our state. There'll be no more guessing, no more arguing or debating over dueling polls, just the actual voice of the people telling us what their will is on this issue. Standing up for New Hampshire families, and many Democrats have tried very hard over recent months to convince everyone that the majority of New Hampshire citizens support the current law and do not want it changed. Well, if these opponents to traditional marriage really believe their own propaganda, they should be eager to join with me in putting this question on the ballot in November in order to prove their point. I am ready to accept and implement the will of the people on marriage in our state. I hope the rest of the legislature is as well. Neither the members of the legislature nor the governor should be so arrogant as to tell the voters of this state that the New Hampshire government does not care what the people think or what they want. We are here to represent and to serve them. And as the Declaration of Independence says, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Once again, I am ready to accept the will of the people. Now let's see if those on the other side of this debate will do the same. Or are the homosexual activists only interested in pushing through their own agenda without regard for the will of the people of this state? On an issue of this importance that affects virtually everyone in our society, it is very appropriate that we seek the consent of the people directly. And that is what I propose to do. I'd be happy to take any questions.